Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
How are you all
Good
doing
evening.
today?
Doing
Good.
well.
All right, ladies, I am excited for this session that we're going to be having. How you doing, Karen, co-host?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing
Okay, good evening,
fine.
everyone.
Yes.
Good
We,
evening.
how are you all
Good
doing
evening.
today?
Doing well. All right,
Okay,
ladies, I am excited for
give
this
me one
session that
minute
we're
just to
going to
clean
be
this
having.
feedback up.
How you doing, Karen, co-host?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fine. Good evening, everyone.
Yes. Okay, I thought we had a feedback, but I think I got it. I think I got it. All right. We're so
Yes.
excited this afternoon to be talking to a woman that has dedicated her life to genealogy research and telling the story, the Mammy story. And so we are very happy to have Gaynell to join us and talk about what she's been doing, how long she's been doing it, and how she got started. So, everyone, let's welcome Gaynell Brady to our segment tonight. Hi,
Welcome.
Gaynell.
Welcome.
Hi, thank y'all for having me. I'm so excited. Like I was telling my mom earlier, she was like, "What are you gonna be talking about?" I said, "It doesn't matter, Mama. You have to think about who I'm talking to."
What
So
she
just
should know
excited.
anything that you'll be talking about is genealogy related, huh?
She does. She does. And I would
Gaynell,
say
how
yes,
how did you get started in your genealogy?
my well, I think it started in two different ways in two different phases. Like as a kid, I was always that one that loved to like pick my grandmother's brain, my maternal grandmother, so my mom's mom, and she just had so many grandkids. She had 16 kids, and so all of them had kids, and we were all be at her house. And I was just the one that just wanted to pick her brain. I would always ask her like, "Grandma, were you a slave? Was your mom a slave?" And her answer was just always, "Now, now, now." And so I just that part of me, and I've always loved history. But it wasn't until 2007 that I actually started doing genealogy. Right after I had my first son, and from there I just never stopped. I just kept going, and at that point I would say, Antoinette, it was more of like finding names and people that meaning didn't quite click yet.
Mm-hmm.
It would take a couple of years and some life experiences to guide me into this work. It wasn't until 2013 that I really started to look deeper into the stories, and wanted to know not just the person's name and date of birth and when they died, but who was this person. So that's kind of like was my earlier start. So I did some intensive stuff from 2007, 13, but not the real meat of the story, the important stuff. The dates don't matter. The stuff in the middle, that's what really counts to me.
Mm-hmm. 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 The events and their life and where they do and where they live and
Mhm.
all those
Mhm.
goes with that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Journey. Carrie, you have any questions for Gaynell?
Well, I like how you say it's the stuff in the middle is what matters.
Mhm.
What kind of stuff in the middle have you found?
Well, it depends on the side of the family. My dad's side was fairly easy. Not in a good way, but all of the pieces were laid out for me from the age of, I would say, 10, 11 years old that I can think of. My dad's side was from Point Capee and West Baton Rouge parishes. And so one of our family traditions is on Sunday. It's called Family Sunday. So we would go up to visit his aunt, his great aunt. Well, that's my great aunt, his aunt's house, and she was still living on a plantation. I didn't know that until I became an adult, that she was still living on a plantation. So it was very easy for me to find them because they were still in the same spot, and some of them are still in that same community. So all of his stuff, and to my advantage, both my dad's mom and dad were from the same neighborhood. So I had the ease of being able to just take their research. I think my grandfather's side on my dad's side goes back to the 1600s, and on my grandmother's side, maybe early 1800s. But they were all right there living in Ward 8 of Point Coupee Parish. So I was very fortunate. Whereas, and those stories were just kind of like, oh, the meat, as Karen mentioned, that's when I learned that my brother and my dad are all fourth, fifth generation carpenters. We have literally been building Louisiana on that side. And my brother was so inspired by it. He actually started his own construction company, and he named it after the road our ancestors lived on, Gravel Road. So finding the meat on that side meant a lot to my dad. It was like, so I didn't just pick up a hammer one day and it just magically happened. It was already embedded in me.
It's in the DNA, huh? Yeah.
It is, Antoinette. And it's so interesting because I found that my third great grandfather was an engineer on a plantation and his son was a carpenter. And so that didn't just mean a lot to me. It meant a lot to the men in my family who are all in this line of work. It's so funny, even my husband, like we were complete opposites. Like he knows more of the domestic stuff and I can help put on a roof. And Daddy taught me, but I don't do it so much now. But life has an interesting way of making you be who you are, who you're supposed to be. And like you said, it's embedded in your DNA. Of my mom's side, I'm still uncovering some of those mysteries. These powerful women, like the women on my mom's side who were from Clinton, Louisiana, East Louisiana Parish. Man, those women, those were some strong women. I mean, way stronger than the women on my dad's side. I mean, the way that those women stick together, even today, like I told my mom, I said, man, all of your sisters are crazy. Y'all are crazy, but they stick together. They're so close. And my mom always says, yeah, we believe strength in numbers. So they were able to accomplish like major things with limited resources.
Yeah, they support each other and they realize that
absolutely
is the most valuable resource that anybody can ever have. And
exactly. And
in those things that you found, because a lot of times what you're talking about right now is things that people forget. You know, they look at the names, they look for the documentation, they look for the photos, the oral history, but to talk about the way the family really lived in unity, that's important.
Exactly.
Pointing that out, Gaynell.
Exactly. And those are the things that I needed, Antoinette, you know, and I'll share this with you and Karen in the audience. Those were the things that I needed to get through difficult things in my life. I remember a couple of years back, I lost a hearing in my left ear. And it wasn't until my husband took me into St. Francisville and I stepped on the land of my ancestors and I could hear them say, it's going to be okay. And then my husband was like, do you need to do anything else? I said, nope, I'm ready to go.
I remember you.
And I've been fine ever since.
I remember.
I've been fine, Antoinette.
Wow.
And I don't wear a hearing aid. I have my frustrating moments, but I hear that voice. It's going to be okay. You will adapt. And it said, you know, you're just going to learn to listen and you're going to learn to watch facial expressions. You're going to do this. And it's not going to change anything. And everything has been fine since then. Like, I found all the strength that I need from all of these women on my family tree. Like, the things that I've learned from, like, my mom's big sisters, my mom, and all of those women before me has carried me through some of the most difficult things in my life. And sometimes when I see their stories, like one of my grandmothers, she burned to death uptown on Jenner Street. And for me to read that, it broke me. But to learn that the women on that side of the family also made sure her kids and everybody else was taken care of because they pulled together. So even when you lost someone, people knew how to step in and fill the void. And I remember when people would pass away, my grandma would just sit in the front of the church and she would just be, you know, firm. And then, like, I remember when she died, I was like, Grandma, the one thing you can leave me is to teach me how to do what you did. I want to be that rock, that one that can put together the pieces when people are looking for information about the family. I want to be able to share it, not to empower them, to inspire them. Like, you know, the fact that my grandma was one of the first ones that can read and write. That was my reason to get people out to vote. It was like, grandma stood in line to vote off of dialysis. She made this happen. Get up and go do it. Do it for her. Don't just put her picture up on her birthday.
Right.
Get out there and go and do what she would do. Support the community, feed the community, volunteer in the community, feed those, and be judgment free. That was my grandma. No matter what you did in life, judgment free. This is your soft place to land.
And you know, so, Karen, hearing Gaynell talk about her female, the women in her family, you know, oftentimes the women get lost because they marry. Sometimes it's hard to find. Sometimes it's hard to track their lives. But Gaynell is talking about the strength of the women in her family, which is so important because oftentimes we don't talk about the strength. And then to go back more than one generation, you know, to talk about how strong your grandmother is, because we feel the same way about our Emma Harrell. Karen and I share.
Absolutely.
You know, Emma was the first woman in our family to purchase land. She ran her own business. She bought land separate from her husband when women didn't have a right to buy land. And so when we think about what make us be these strong, resilient women that we are, is because some woman came before us who was strong and resilient. And we have to really think about them and call their names and, you know, just reflect upon that. Karen?
And I think, I agree.
Yeah, and also oftentimes we also take for granted that the women are strong. It's like it's a given because that's pretty much what we have almost always known, that, you know, the women are strong, because that's what we see, especially when we think about our grandmothers.
Yeah. So, Gaynell, how did the Mammy story, and you gave life to our Mammys, when people do not want to deal with the Mammy story because a lot of people feel like it's degrading, they don't want to tell that story. But when, in essence, when you look at it, a lot of the women play the role of the Mammys. And
I think, yes, ma'am. I think you that was the piece, Antoinette. That was the piece for me. Like you said, because when people heard that word, they cringed. It was almost as if people wanted to be ashamed of who that woman was. And we do the same thing with the word Uncle Tom, and we don't understand who these people really were. And I, you know, in looking at like Mama Bell and Mama Florence and Mama Sarah and Mama Sally, Mama Polly, and all those before her, these were the women who were called Mammy. And there was really nothing like was depicted in history. And those little stereotypes that they had flying around during Jim Crow and the period of Reconstruction. I mean, as I tell people, Mammy raised the country. We owe her so much more than what we give her. That name means so much more than what we try to depict in some of these images that I see for her. So I just want to like take that word, reclaim it, and restructure it and tell the stories about these women. Like Karen said, like they were strong. Not life made them strong. Things they've experienced made them strong. I remember one day I just was sitting in here and I was writing my heart out, and I was just like, I had a bad day that day, and I was like people, did people understand this lady had her hands on her hip and on her back because her back hurt, her feet hurt.
She was balancing herself.
Yes.
And now
she was tired.
I need to go back because a lot of young people who are watching this segment, they don't even know what Mammy is, or when you refer to Mammy. Who you talking about?
For me,
what you talking about?
Okay, so my definition of this quote unquote mammy is just a female in a family. And mama. All of the women in my family were called Mama in their first name. Mama Florence.
Yes.
Mama Bell. Mama Polly. Mama Sally. You couldn't just call them by their first name. It was just your mama. If your mama stepped out of place, this is your mama. This is the person who raised you. And that was the interesting twists and turns that I found in my family tree. There were these mamas or these mammies raising kids and claiming them as their own, and they really weren't. But she didn't separate them. And this mammy that they depict on a lot of these films and a lot of these movies is, this loudmouth, sassy, big fat woman, sassy, she just, uneducated, just docile. And I'm like, man, my grandma is not that person. My grandma is someone else. They called my grandma and my great-grandma Mammy, they called her that. But she was just so much more than that. And I think a part of that too came out of everywhere I looked in terms of genealogy. Everybody was they were talking about all of the free people. And I was like, but what about that one that's hiding in the background on those photos, holding that baby in her hand? She has feelings. She's a human. She's a person. What about her? So I realized that person in the background, for the most part, that was my ancestors. I'm talking about my grandma. So it's like, wait a minute, let me tell her story. She's not just this, loudmouth person. This lady literally was the rock of her community, and this is the reason why when mama goes, the family tends to fall apart for a moment until we readjust. Nothing in this country can survive without that woman. Nothing.
And we see that often. We see what you just said, and we want to just say something with that. Many families experience what you were talking about. When mama dies, a big mama dies,
yes, ma'am.
There's no more family gathering. It becomes individual family pockets where people gather at their own house. But there's no more gathering at a neutral place when mama died, mama died.
And it takes some time to correct that.
How you correct that?
Good question.
And this is the thing, Karen. We're still in that correction, and my grandmother died in the early 2000s. We are still trying to correct that. Like Antoinette just said, we're still in pockets. My mom's kids are with her kids. She's with her grandkids. And I try my hardest to stay in touch with my distant cousins. Like, they come by me at Mammy's. I have a little spot in the lower 9. I'll reveal it later this year. But they come by me, and we talk about, like, the family history and stuff. And so my kids are listening. My cousin Bruce is one of those ones. He's like my mom's first cousin. And he's always there with me. And he shares stories with me about, like, my great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather. And how they all live right around the corner from each other. Everybody stood in the same community. And those stories still live on. And it's just up to my generation to start building in some of that correction. But I think one of the issues that I'm running into, and I'll just say bluntly, my heart aches for people who didn't have a grandmother born before 1940. It's different, Karen.
Well, because grandmothers look different these days. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. Grandmothers, a lot of times the grandmothers are getting younger. Grandmothers are still doing them in some regards.
Yes, ma'am.
More how you look. I look too young to be a grandmother. You hear people say those things. These are the terminologies
yes, they do.
that we hear. And so if a person is focusing on how they look or dressing something in regards to like the daughter, would she haven't embraced being the word grandmother? You know, I've heard people say they told their grandchildren, do not call me mama, do not call me grandmother, call me Gigi, call me all these names, but do not, and that name right there, they have taken that away. When we think about grandmothers and whoever we call them, they never correct us. It was never, don't call me grandmother. You know what I'm saying? Have you heard parents, people say, don't call me grandmother?
Yes, yeah, everything but grandmother. I'm grandma.
Yeah.
Because I'm glamorous. As if grandmas aren't glamorous.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, and so this conversation that we're having to address that right now is, it's a scary thing moving forward as to how we see the next generation of grandmothers.
It's a different vibe, and I guess I'm still adjusting to the shock that I saw a couple of days ago when I was in the lower 9. I saw a young lady outside in her bra and her underwear. A tear dropped in my eye, and I told my husband, my grandma didn't let me go to school with a school uniform on without a slip-on under it. Grandma would say, where's your slip? And I'm like, Grandma, I have on shorts. Like, it's going to be okay. No, I'm going to call your mom and tell her you need to go to Kraus because you need a slip. And I'm like, okay. Couldn't argue back and forward. I mean, it was, you need a slip, and I'm going to tell your mama to go and get you a slip. And so sometimes I wish those grandmas were still here.
Well, I
really do.
That's why I
just need a few of them.
Talking about who is the Mammy story. We don't see them. She was the one who basically ran the house. She was the one that people came to for advice. She was the one that not only did she help her household, but she was involved in the community. Anything went down,
absolutely.
There was women that was sick, or someone had a baby, or someone that was ill, like we said a few minutes ago. Those women was the glue to the community. They was the glue to the fabric in our societies, and we do owe them much more than you know. That's degrading, you know. And so highlighting and telling the story of all of the women who showed to stand on, who people tend to push them in the back.
They do. And even when I think about like the history books that I read, and the things that, we're pretty much taught in school, it doesn't teach you the importance of this woman. And the reason why I was saying earlier, I want her back is because the thing that she gave us most was her love ourselves. No matter what your situation is, that's what Mammy has taught us from the beginning of the time. Love and respect yourself. And I want that piece back, Antoinette. Like I use genealogy as that tool so that kids can go back and look at their tree and find themselves in someone that came before them. And I think that genealogy really can solve some of the problems that we have in the community, because I want kids to understand that just because their ancestors are not here on earth with them, I want them to have that feeling of they're always watching you. Even though Mammy may be gone, Mama Florence may be gone, Big Mama's gone, or Grandma's gone, she still sees you. That's the piece that I want people to remember. And I want them to be proud of who these women were. I don't care if she swept a floor, if she made beds, if she took care of somebody else. Hold her at that same, put her on that pedestal right next to all of these other people that you look up to, because she earned that. She earned that. And I just want people to look at anyone on their family tree and feel proud about what they've accomplished.
Exactly.
Because these people accomplished No matter, like you were saying earlier, one of your ancestors purchased some land. That's amazing. I watched my great aunt pool together their money to purchase a church for their father in uptown New Orleans. They pulled together. They worked all these various jobs, cleaning up. And the sisters said, we want our dad to have his own church in New Orleans. And they bought that building on 2nd Street. And it became Second Nazareth Baptist Church. And for these people to come out of Clinton, to come out of their Solomons, and to be all working class people to accomplish that, that's amazing. I wish that my relatives today that say, let's pool together some money and buy an apartment complex. So no matter what, we always have a place to stay. But something happened within one generation that changed all of that. We're literally one generation off for us.
You were saying something, Karen?
No, that was Gaynell.
Mm-hmm.
What I saw happen is, and I can speak in first person family.
Yes, ma'am.
When those that managed to attend college,
Mm-hmm.
they became educated, they became a different people. And those same educated people at that particular time, they started to look down on the dirt poor farmers. How many people heard that terminology, dirt poor farmers? My grandfather was just a dirt poor farmer. You heard that terminology because then the education became what they built everything upon. They forgot about the family value. So now it didn't matter that Big Mama scrubbed so many floors, did whatever she had to do to help to buy the books. They became too educated for their own family members sometimes. And so when the first person who moved off the acres of land and bought their own property, then there those little pockets started to build, those little individual pockets. And so the first person who went to college, their children went to college versus somebody else's kids in the family that didn't. So they started to look down upon this particular family here. And so Big Mama loved all of her children. Now, sometimes that was a difference in the children as well, coming from Big Mama. And so sometimes those conversations that's need to be talked about as to what was Big Mama to, because your Big Mama to you was a loving person. You hear something say, well, she only liked the light-skinned children. She didn't like the dark-skinned children.
Yes.
And so when she died, they buried her. And they buried all those horrible memories with her and didn't want to relive it again.
Yes, ma'am.
And so those round table family discussions is very important because what we can learn from our experiences, you know, if you have more than one child, you have more than one grandchild, you love them equally. You know, you don't make sure whatever you do, you don't put that division in there to say, I like the lighter skinned children or the ones with the so-called good hair. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
You know,
yes, we do.
Those crazy things. And so I've heard people say, no. She treated us different than what she treated y'all. I hear people say,
absolutely.
Have you
absolutely.
heard?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, it wasn't until very recently I understood why. I think for me, I always want to know what structures a person to behave a certain way.
Yeah.
You know, and like, it's so funny because on my dad's side, my dad is the color of the tires on your car. But he had two siblings that were very fair. And he said one side of the family treated them, the dark side, differently. And I'm like, isn't that something? And a lot of that trickled down to my dad too. He had to learn that, wait a minute, you know, if that's not okay. then I wanted to ask, like, why is that? What is going on? And then I started doing a little digging on that side of the tree. And I see at one point, there were some relatives who owned my family. You heard me say relatives who owned my family, who were very fair. And maybe that came from that, Antoinette. Maybe it came from they were accepted because they were the right skin color and everybody else had to go in the field.
Well, see, at least you know that. You know, a lot of people do not know why those behaviors are in their family because they know
absolutely
family history. But at least you can say, you know. A lot of people can't say that. So that's very important because 10 years from now, family is going to look totally, totally different. You know,
I agree with you.
I
agree with you.
I just feel that the last of family unity is about to be the thing in the past because let's look at it. Big Mama would not ever allow for cell phones to be at the kitchen table, the dining room table while you was having dinner. Big Mama would not ever allow a lot of things that we see now. And I see women who are grandmothers, but they don't embrace motherhood, let alone grandmotherhood, you know. It's just a difference. So I see what our grandmothers wouldn't accept, and I hear people say, and I heard my son say this, well, that was the old way of doing things. Well, some things the old we should hold on to, and those things that didn't work is okay. We should want to get rid of those things that didn't work, but those things that didn't work, keeping the family together. Because at a funeral, I think when we go to say our last goodbyes to the deceased person in the family, we just need to scan the room and say, okay, I know I won't be seeing this one here until a funeral. And all the times we hear people say that we need to stop making funerals our family reunions, but the truth in essence is the family.
It is. That's the only time like people really feel obligated to be there. But if the thing is like you brought something, it came to the front of my head when you were talking about the last of like the true family unit, and it made me think about something. I think life is going to push us back to some of that. And the reason why I say that, Antoinette, like if you look at it in the city of New Orleans right now, you can't afford to rent anything. That's going to push us back in the same household. Food is getting expensive. Every time we go to Sam's Club, you know, my husband and I dread it because it's $200+ every week because our kids eat. And because of that, we had to start a little garden on Flush Street. I was like, I got to save something somewhere. So all of those skills that everybody looked down on, sewing and gardening and all of that stuff, we're going to have to pick all of that back up just to survive. Mr. 45 was pushing us there.
But Gaynell,
and
we don't even want to live. We can't even live in a household with some family members. Let's keep it real. Big Mama did not allow you to lay in the bed till 12 and 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. You just no.
My mama wouldn't allow that.
Yeah. So there was just some things the way we was brought up that we was not allowed to do, and that's what have made us the people that we are today. But for the most part, a lot of the young people, they don't have those same principles. You know, early rise, do what you need to do. They wake up at 3 o'clock, and when they wake up at 3 o'clock, this is it. See this little gadget here?
Yes,
they got this on.
Absolutely,
this is it. You know, and so if there's household chores that need to be done, we wasn't even told what needed to be done. Now, if there was something extra that we had to do, they told you that. But if that was something you had to do, you knew what your chores was. Now, schools don't even have chores. So
no, they don't.
I think that's why we see a lot of homeless families out there and homeless individuals, because as Big Mama said, there's rules everywhere. So if somebody came to your house and they may not be able to contribute financially, well, they can go outside and work in the garden. But what they're going to tell you, too hot out there.
Bring a fan.
Okay, now let me ask you a question. If you look at any of your family members on the 1940 census, do you find multi-generational living?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think most of us can probably find that if we, as we are doing our family history research, and I looked at that and I said, there's something to that. And then, even as you look further back, and I say 1940 because that's the last one. And my mom was born in 43. And so I can see my grandmother living with my great grandmother in 1940. And so, and I know even previous censuses to that, I see multi-generational family living. And that's why I think we have so many doubles in New Orleans, because either you live in the same direct household or right next door or right downstairs. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, even if it were not for finances forcing us back to that. I think getting back to that will also help to kind of get back to where we should be trying to get back to in terms of the closeness of the family.
And I think like with my family, Karen, there are still households that are multi-generational within my family, especially on my mom's side. And it's a financial, but also a support system. You stay with mama, grandbaby, and hubby stay with mama until you guys can figure it out. Go to school, go to college, go take up your little work trade programs, and I'll take care of the baby. Because I'm fortunate that I can do that. I just want to see you guys get out there and have a good, solid foundation before you step out into the world. And so I see that. And that's why I'm slightly hopeful. I'm hopeful that just like my ancestors said, hey, Gaynell, I need you to do this, that's going to happen at some point for everybody else. And, if anything else we've learned from this pandemic, you better have a plan and some skill sets. I mean, I saw you spring into action when you were making a face mask. Somebody taught you that skill set.
My grandma.
Just think if you didn't know it. And the whole time, like I see Antoinette when she's gardening, when she has her grandkids with her. And, and they're paying attention.
Yeah.
So somebody's going to be paying attention. And like I tell people all the time, you may not get everybody, but just get a few people to pay attention, because we're going to be lost. And we can't lose a whole generation.
We are lost. I believe at this point, we are lost because this generation, they want it here, they want it now, they want everything instant. Now they will go out in the garden and pull an orange off the tree, which is easy. But they want you to go to plant the garden, harvest the garden, cook it, and then bring it to them.
Then wash the dishes.
No, right. They don't even know the first thing about cooking fresh anything. And that was another Big Mama. Big Mama was the doctor. She was the nurse.
Yeah.
She was the glue. We can go on and on about who this woman was to us in so many ways. I'm a product of the 60s. And when you got sick, sometimes you didn't even go to the hospital because it was still, in the early parts of that, it was still segregated. Well, Big Mama used to do concoctions. And if you were cold or something, she had a remedy for all of that, And if your Big Mama didn't do it, Big Mama had a friend or a church member that knew how to do it. The neighbor, had someone. And so it was a community of women who was resourceful with each other. They would come together, they would make quilts, they would do the tea cakes. If somebody burned out, those women would really come together. And so honoring them on nurturing our roots is what it's all about. From slavery to freedom, this is who we are. To talk about how important, it's one thing to talk about the written history. And it's one thing to talk about the oral history, but then the collective history that you were talking about give life to the story. It gives meaning.
And it gives my life meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I put those clothes on, I almost become another person.
Yeah.
And then people say, how can you wear that? Shouldn't you be ashamed? No, because I'm talking about somebody that everybody else forgot about.
That's right. That's right. And
if I didn't talk about Aunt Mary and Aunt Alice, they wouldn't matter. They didn't matter to you. You didn't include them in your textbook. So
yes.
I'm proud to put these clothes on. Sometimes I put them on early in the day and I forget I have them on. And if I tell you I'm portraying this woman, I'm going to tell her story all day. And the funny thing is, I tell my husband, I'll start out one way combing my hair and I can't get it to go a certain way and I have a hair wrap. And it's almost as if they decide. No, not today. And I would say, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about Grandma Polly all day. And as soon as I open my mouth answering that, it would be Grandma Sally. And I was like, okay. And I would just start telling her story. I feel like at that point they're saying I have something to say. And I share it. And so people say, oh, what dress you gonna wear? I don't know. I never know until the day of. And sometimes it happens to me twice, where I had to switch the dress an hour before. Like, no, you're not wearing this one. It's gonna be this one. And a lot of these stories. Sometimes it'll wake me up the day before and say, no. I know you said you were going to do this, but today we really need to talk about that. And it's always at the end of one of my talks, somebody will inbox me or send me a message and say, I needed that. Your story reminded me of this. I need to get back to doing that. And that's what makes my work feel important. I also have what I call hate mail that comes in. Oh, you're taking us back to the slavery days. We need to let that go. Why? Do you remember 9/11? Do you remember World War II? So how can you remember all of that and want to forget everything else? You can't pick and choose who you remember or what you remember.
You get a lot of hate mail because of what you do?
Yep. And for that reason, my husband, he scans all of my emails and my inbox messages on social media. He looks at them and he'll talk to them. One guy, he actually had him to call. And we had a conversation with him for about 30 minutes. And he literally said, well, I'm afraid to look at you and that stuff. It just brings back terrible memories.
Was he a younger guy or older guy?
About my age. And I'm 43.
Okay.
And he said, I would visit the plantation and my grandma would tell me stories and I'm just afraid. I just don't know. I said, so you're afraid of baby dolls? Well, what do you mean? Well, that's usually what I have with me. Baby dolls, a little slave cabin. I mean, it sounds like you know your history a little bit and you're just afraid to deal with it. Because you had the privilege for your grandma to take you to the plantation where she came from. She had lunch with you there. She shared all her stories and all the family stories with you. It sounds like you're not afraid. It sounds like you're ashamed.
And that's a big difference.
So I'm not.
But do you think a lot of people are ashamed?
I don't know, Karen. I don't know. I think sometimes it's a mix. I get mixed reactions. I have people to come up to me and walk up to me and grab my hands and hold on to me tight and say thank you. Those are mostly elderly women. And they'll say, well, why do you put the clothes on? I said, because that's how I get people's attention. If I was out here in a t-shirt and some jeans, they don't want me to talk about genealogy and history.
Well, it's a reenactment. And I think that you're doing more than just telling a story, but you're reenacting the story no more than the Civil War reenactments or people may say Confederate soldiers reenactment, whatever, you know. So no one is afraid to shame to put those uniforms on to tell the story. So
They're
certainly,
not.
yeah, right. And I can understand, and I really appreciate you taking the moment and the time to educate people because they don't know, and that's very important on what you do. We have 15 minutes left in this segment, and I guess about 10 minutes to continue this conversation. You speak at a lot of schools, libraries. Are you doing more virtual speaking engagements now
So
since COVID?
I just reopened on Halloween. That was actually my grandma's birthday, and I did a big trunk or treat in the neighborhood where she lived, and I gave away candy with drive-through trunk or treating. So I am moving everything virtually over the next couple of months. If we go back to phase one, I will keep everything 100% virtual. I do have 2 autoimmune diseases that constantly worries my husband, and my safety is our number one concern. So I have been doing a lot of research and writing and expanding the stories that I've been telling. So just increase programs, and I have done some genealogy talks for like private groups and such through the Zoom and places like that, but I haven't really done, and I miss that, Antoinette. I miss being in those spaces with kids and with families, and having them to touch history. And that's the thing that I miss most, but I'm working around it. I'm actually having some stuff done in the lower 9 that allow me to have a piece of that kind of like interaction, but not a lot.
Karen, any questions before closing out?
Yeah, we all have to adapt, and so I'm glad to see that that you are adapting. One question I did have from earlier, you mentioned Point Coupee, and that you guys would go to the family plantation. What plantation was that?
It's actually right on the side of Glenwood Plantation. I think that's Louisiana Highway 983 or either Louisiana 1. Can't remember which one it is, but my family is buried at St. Mark's Church there. Aunt Alice stood across the street from there, and she had a bar and lounge next door to her house, and it was called Joe Bradley's Dewdrop Inn. And so that was her husband.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the house we would visit. Aunt Alice's house is still there. The family cemetery is still across the street. So like I said, that side of the family, I was just fortunate. Everything was still standing.
I think that if a lot of people would think about where it is they go to the country to, if they did a little family research, they would find that that is more than likely one of the land where one of the plantations was or still is, where their families were enslaved.
I agree, especially here. I agree. We never moved too far from it.
Yes. We always went to the country.
Yeah. Karen and our ancestors go back to Clinton, Louisiana too. So somewhere in that time and space and period, I know our ancestors cross paths, and that's something to look at us now. We're still crossing paths, because they too, the Harrell side of our family was in Clinton, Louisiana.
My great aunt Mariah married a Harrell.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's something.
Yeah. From East Louisiana?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Her maiden name was Jefferson. So yeah, we're still crossing paths.
Yeah, we're still crossing paths. And I feel that our ancestors want us to know they're guiding us. If we think about it and put ourselves in the shoes of those that has passed on and those that have given us so much, and for us to, and it remind me of what Maya Angelou said. She said, we forget our ancestors, our children will forget us. So we really have to use this opportunity to tell our children, our grandchildren, nieces and nephews at every given twist about the family.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
one of the things that really helped our family is creating those social media sites. And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
members have joined the sites. Those that didn't know anything
Mm-hmm.
about family history, they'll learn about family history now. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I know gay nails, sometimes it's very tiring, it's very taxing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
feels like a weight on our shoulder because
Yes.
if we don't tell the story, who will? It's
Mm-hmm.
your narrative,
Mm-hmm.
it's your story, it's your narrative, and you have to tell it because your ancestors was important to you. It may not be
Mm-hmm.
important to the world or anything else
Mm-hmm.
or other people, but they are important to you. My ancestors are important to us. And I'm
Absolutely.
every time Karen speak, I can't help but look at a lot of the pictures that's behind her, and everybody
Mm-hmm.
in that picture behind her, I remember them. Her grandmother,
Wow.
father, her great grandfather, all these people, and the way she have the photographs at this point, it's like they are there, they are in the
Yeah.
shadow, they are in the
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
get it because I have three of mine sitting above me, and I want to feel like they're always looking over my
Yeah.
shoulder.
they're always looking over our
Mm-hmm.
shoulders, and we always need to go back and just remember, you know, um, them and what they
Mm-hmm.
us and the morals, the values. Not everything about our ancestors was good, but one thing, and our
No.
children will say that about us. But one thing we do know, we pick the strongest things. We build
Mm-hmm.
up on that, and those things that we do need to change, it gives us that opportunity to change that, to be better mothers, better grandfathers, better dads,
Mm-hmm.
better grandmothers and sisters and brothers. We can learn from some of those lessons, you know.
Absolutely.
So Gaynell, we thank
It's
you for being a part.
thank you so much.
As always, we can sit here and listen to you all day because you have so much wisdom and so much experience to be a young woman of 43 years old.
Mm.
So we know that you have your calling and you have answered your calling, that's for sure.
Yes, it brings me so much joy and peace. So thank you for giving me a platform to share their stories. I
You-
appreciate
You're
it.
quite welcome. Thank you. And before we close out, I also like to talk about our story coming up next week. And I'm going to let Karen tell us a little bit about who she will be talking to and why this story, Karen.
Yes,
What?
next week we're going to have Melissa Kemp and Nages Rucker, who are both descendants of Louisa Mahoney Mason, who was enslaved by the Jesuit priests of Georgetown University. And the lady in the picture with me, Gladys Kemp, she was the last of a long line of descendants of Louisa to work for the Jesuits. And Gladys, Miss Gladys to me, right? Miss Gladys recently retired a few years ago. That I guess ends that long line of direct descendants of Louisa who worked for the Jesuits. But Louisa was supposed to be sold to Louisiana, but she was told to stay behind. And so that was one of the first stories I learned when I learned my husband was a descendant of those who were sold to Louisiana. And so I'm looking forward to having Melissa and the guest talk about their ancestor, Louisa Mahoney Mason.
So Louisa was told to stay behind in Maryland.
Yes, yes, and she did. She did. She did not come to Louisiana, although other parts of her family did come to Louisiana. And so you'll learn more about maybe who some of those other people were who came to Louisiana, and who knows, you may descend from some of Louisa's um, family members who ended up in Louisiana.
And so we're asking everybody to please join us every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock right here on Nurturing Our Roots Zoom live streaming. I know many of you have been following us on Facebook, But what we decided to do, my co-host Karen and I, we decided to take it to YouTube where people can go back and look at it, at their leisure. So every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, you will find us on here talking about many different topics as it relates to genealogy, nurturing our roots from slavery to freedom. And genealogy is all that. I truly believe that Karen and Gaynell, we are still in reconstruction. People might say there was a period for reconstruction, but I don't believe that. I believe that we are still in reconstruction. Gaynell, can you unmute yourself? I did mute you. And I
Okay.
do believe that in the last 4 minutes, ladies, do you all think that we're still in reconstruction?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm. I
Yes.
believe so too. I believe that we are because we're still, first of all, we're still trying to find our family members.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Mhm. And so next week I'll be here to learn about Louisa, her
Mhm.
story. And so Karen will have the floor, and I'm going to be there just operating in the chat room. But for anyone that would like to join, we will be posting a link where you can follow us live on YouTube. So thank you all for being patient with us as we work through these technical difficulties. But nevertheless, we're bringing a platform of genealogy, family history, guests who want to talk about their family history and share with us their history and their experience as well. And so, before we close out, I would like to turn it over to my co host. And if there's anything that you would like to add to this segment.
Again, I would just like to thank Gaynell. And Gaynell, if you have something coming up in the future that you want to put the date out there and go and give your website again so that folks can follow along and find out what's going on and what's happening next with you.
Yes. Follow me at ourmammys.com. I post everything there, and most of the times I try to make it free and open to the public. So please follow along.
And we'll
Would
be happy
appreciate the support.
your website on our Nurturing Our Roots page too, because we haven't found any genealogy societies in this region, the East Florida parishes of African descent. And so it really helps when we collaborate together to share our
Absolutely.
stories from those areas. Uh, that's the
Mhm.
least that we can do right now because I feel like this pandemic is going to push us back again to phase one.
Mhm.
And so we really have
Mhm.
it's a time, like you said earlier, Gaynell, it's a time to write, it's a time to build databases, indexes to other things that we have that
Mhm.
can help to. I know a lot of us have information right in our homes that we can be working with.
Mhm.
My desk, my floor is full of things. And I
Yeah.
look at it, it's time to go ahead and start tackling that to get it to the place. Well, I'm really shooting for January and February to have it all out of here. And it takes a little time
Awesome.
to, index to it and put it where
Mhm.
I know that it would be very powerful.
Yes.
Hmm.
And also, another thing folks can do is start putting names on the back of those photographs. That's
Hmm.
what you can do
Yes.
while you're sitting around at home.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And also too, before putting the names, you may want to go online and look at what should you use to put those names on there.
Mhm.
Most of the time, it is a pencil that and make sure you don't damage the picture. So that is a lot to consider. And sometimes just clean out our house. Now I'm gonna tell you something. Before we
Mhm.
go out this 1 minute. 20 years from now, young people will not have anything in their homes to clean out because everything is electronic on the phone.
Mhm.
All pictures is on
Mhm.
the phone. And they lose all
Mhm.
pictures when they change their phone most of the time.
Mhm.
So it's a different way now. So, ladies, genealogists, I want to thank you all for joining us right here on Nurturing Our Roots. And from slavery to freedom, we talk about it right here on Nurturing Our Roots Zoom live stream with Antoinette and Karen. Gaynell, once again, thank you for being a guest.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate